Hi, this is a regular session of Athens City Council. It's Tuesday night, January 18th. Yesterday, of course, was Martin Luther King holiday, so we didn't meet on Monday, which is our regular night. So we're doing this on Tuesday, January 18th, on or about 7:30. We're beginning. I'm Jim Sands. I'm acting, I guess proper term is President Pro Tem. I'm the acting president. President Bill Bias is not here right now. We do have a quorum of council with all members present. I will be voting as a council member on any issues that might come up for a vote. As far as I know, there aren't any issues coming up for a vote tonight. But, there were. So we will begin with disposition of minutes from our regular session held January 3rd, 2011. This was our meeting 2 weeks ago.
Second. Accepted.
Moving to the second. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from January 3rd, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Communications. The clerk of council has handed me two liquor permit papers. One is a transfer in name only for the Smiling Skull Saloon. The Smiling Skull Saloon. It has been the name of the on the liquor control license has been Robert C. Wolf and Constance Thayer Wolf, doing business as Smiling Skull Saloon. Now it is just Smiling Skull Saloon LLC, doing business as Smiling Skull. So it is a change in name only. The other is a transfer of a liquor permit, retail sale of liquor to the Kroger Company from the Lucky Dog carryout, which was on West Union Street. I'm still not sure exactly why, but I think the transfer has already been made. If anybody here on council has a concern with that, they can certainly file that, and we will forward that to the Board of Liquor Control. That's all we know about it right now. Do you have something to say?
Yes, I do. I would like to have Larry Jagerman accepted to another term on the Disabilities Commission. He is committed to doing his best for the Disabilities Commission, and I would very much like to say thank you to him.
Mr. Jagerman is a committed member of the Did
you move? Oh, I move that we accept.
I thought she did.
I'm sorry.
And he is willing to do it for a second term, and we all should be very happy that he is willing to do that. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of accepting Mr. Larry Jagerman for a second term on the Disabilities Commission, I'm sorry, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Jagerman is not here tonight. I'm sure he's watching. Congratulations. We appreciate your efforts with this commission. Reports and communications from other elected officials. Shall we start with Mayor Weil?
Nothing much, except I will relay to Larry Jagerman tomorrow at the Disabilities Commission meeting, which is at 5:30. He's always coming up with good ideas, so I'm glad he's been reappointed. The other one, of course, just point of information, is a town hall meeting that's going to be taking place February 1st, 6:30 to 8:30. Chance to quiz or ask questions of the administration, city administration. I plan to have most of my department heads there if possible. It's at the community center. And that's all I really.
This is the third town hall meeting?
No, I think we're up. This is the first one for this year, but we've been averaging about 3 to 4 a year.
Yeah. And they've been very well received by the citizens of the city, I'm sure. So, okay, Auditor,
I wonder, and I usually try to say something ahead of time, even if it's sort of the last minute, but I wonder if council could approve the auditor's finance reports from December, which were also the year-end reports.
the auditor is asking for our approval. I will, so moved. All those in favor of accepting the auditor's report for December, which is also the end of the year report, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. The
Thank you.
auditor's report is accepted. Anything else?
I don't think so. Just a reminder to people that our income tax has gone up this year by 0.1%, and that won't affect most of us. Well, we'll see it a little bit on our paychecks, and people who pay withholdings for their businesses will start paying that at the end of the month.
Also, there's a new federal table. I think I saw the email.
There is.
Do you want to talk about that?
That's not our call, no.
Okay.
That's not my call. We just take out what they tell us, so.
Okay.
Yeah, as you know, that's all part of the tax issues at the federal level and changes that were put in place a couple years ago. And so, yes, we've had some employees look at their paychecks and not really see their raises for the year because of the new taxes. But that's a federal issue that we have no control over.
Okay, thank you, Auditor Head. Treasurer Mary Ann McClure.
I'm here this evening to answer questions and or present the resolutions regarding the depository agreements. Did you want me to?
All of you have seen your agendas, and we do have some resolutions for first reading. The treasurer will do her best to explain those to us.
Would you like me to read them, or is it good enough for me?
Why don't we
to
just wait till then? Why don't we wait till we get to that part, and then we'll be filled with questions, I'm sure. Okay, Law Director Lang?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have an item I'd like to discuss this evening. And before I do, I just want to make kind of a general statement because I know that sometimes it can be a little frustrating when we talk about matters of pending litigation, or I should say when we don't talk about matters of pending litigation in the city. And, as law director, I have a responsibility to be very careful about the information that we release and the way in which we talk about cases which are currently pending in courts involving the city. And there's a couple reasons for that. One of them being that as an attorney, I have a professional responsibility to my clients to not divulge, certain things that we may talk about, certain client confidences, and that's the case with any licensed attorney. Because whenever someone is talking to their lawyer, they need to, people have heard of the attorney-client privilege, and people need to understand that they're getting candid advice, and that they are not going to have, that I'm not going to go out and talk to all, the newspapers and make some big speech the next day talking about what it is that we discussed. And just as importantly is that when we are talking about a case that may potentially go to trial, it's important that I don't say anything, or that really none of us in the city and the administration say anything that could potentially taint a jury pool or influence how someone may feel about a certain case that may potentially sit on a jury. And so while it is absolutely natural, I think, to want to respond when there's certain information that may be floating around out there, or a certain comment that may be made, I have to try to take a deep breath and remember that I do have a professional responsibility to be very careful about discussing matters of pending litigation. That said, today I spent a good part of the afternoon in Columbus for a federal court hearing involving the University Estates case. And while I will not be offering any commentary or opinion on there, I do think it's appropriate to read from an order which was issued this afternoon, or just to briefly summarize a few points from that order. And again, I will not be adding any commentary beyond this. The document itself is a public record. And the order does a few things, which I will highlight now. Number one, by agreement of the parties, the counts involving council president bias have been dismissed. The motions which had been filed by the bank to intervene in this case, or it had actually been two separate motions, both of those motions have been withdrawn. So the bank, as of now, is not a party to this litigation. The court has ordered that immediate scheduling for discovery and briefing and just laying various deadlines out for the parties, ultimately commencing with should any comment or commentary for what that is worth. And then there's also some information that I have regarding collective bargaining, but I will wait until we get to the appropriate point on the agenda before I talk about that.
Thank you, Law Director.
Thank you.
Other questions, knowing that the Law Director at this moment is not in a position to really comment on anything he just said? Okay. Anybody else? I think we've covered everyone. Let's move on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 0111, an ordinance authorizing the adoption of an agreement with the Athens City Firefighters Local 3351 and Ohio Council 8, AFSCME, AFL-CIO, concerning wages and working conditions and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Kuhn.
Thank you. This ordinance, of course, is a result of the recent negotiations that we've been having with the firefighters union, and I believe Law Director Lang is going to update us on that.
Yes, thank you, Member Kuhn, and I'm back awful quickly. Yes, as Member Kuhn stated, we have. I'm pleased to announce that we've reached a tentative agreement with our firefighters union, which is AFSCME, Ohio Council 8, Local 3351. And this is the next in a succession of 3-year contracts which govern the working arrangements between the union and the city as the employer. I'd just like to state at the outset that it was, how much I appreciated the opportunity to represent the administration in this negotiation, along with the Service Safety Director, Paula Mosley, and with Personnel Director, Beverly Henderson, and to work with our partners in the union. And I really do say that as, I really do consider them to be certainly partners in this process. In a lot of, labor situations, even with a lot of cities, a lot of times there is a very acrimonious, relationship. And thankfully in the city of Athens that has not typically been the case. Our bargaining units have, I believe, have worked very well with the city and vice versa in a matter of good faith. And certainly, as the employer, as the city in this case, we certainly want to make sure that our workers are receiving an honest day's wage for an honest day's work, and that they have fair benefits. But at the same time, it's important that that council be watching the city's bottom line and watching the taxpayers' dollar to make sure that we are, that it's a fair agreement for all parties involved. So that said, I'd like to just kind of hit some of the highlights of this agreement, which actually had expired. This is retroactive to November. And I guess maybe before I get into some of the specifics, this involved sort of not a unique situation, but an uncommon situation in which we had actually reached a tentative agreement, and members of council had received a memo on this point back prior to the holidays. And that agreement was voted down by the union. And so we returned to the bargaining table and really came away with it with what I certainly, it's a cliche, but I really do think it was a win-win proposition in that, if you can believe it or not, the agreement that we had come to before the holidays actually, once we had come back to the table and renegotiated that, actually lowered our bottom line cost. So the city actually will be paying less money than we would have under the prior agreement, which was voted down by the union. And the way that we did that was in basically shifting around money from one place to another, such that we are spending less, but more of the members of the union are receiving more money, if that makes any sense. So more people are getting more money, yet it's costing us less under this renegotiation. I can get into the specifics of that and take any questions that you may have. That said, just going through the agreement and kind of hitting some of the highlights, particularly those that have a cost bottom line to them. One which really doesn't have too much of a direct cost is the creation of a comp time bank, which essentially allows a worker to take overtime as comp time if they choose up to 48 hours. This is something that exists in our other contracts, actually exists in more than 48 hours. We felt it was important to kind of limit that amount just because we want to safeguard against situations in which more overtime is being created by this use of the comp time bank. Wages, and this is where we made our big change from the initial agreement. Our initial agreement that we had come to back before the holidays was a 2.5% raise across the board. Under this new plan that we had agreed to, actually instead of tying wages to a percentage, we just did it as a lump sum. So what this means is that the percentage, basically for some workers it means they're getting a little more than they would have gotten, and for some workers it means they're getting a little less. But actually, one of the things that this helps to address is the growing gap that we had between various members of the unit. So, for instance, some firefighters, obviously that are making more than others. When you apply a flat percentage to everyone across the board, then you have a growing gap between the higher earners and the lower earners. By instead just using a lump sum figure, then it kind of helps to close that gap a little bit. And that's where we were able to recognize some of the cost savings when we came back to the table for renegotiation. So it's in the agreement there, the exact amounts, and that roughly works out to, depending on who you're talking about, anywhere between 2.5% and around 2.7, 2.8% for some of the workers. So that's the wages issue. On insurance, this was an area where, we had to recognize that times are tough, and particularly with increasing costs, it's not sustainable to be able to continue to have premiums and copays that were set at the level where we had them. And so under this new plan, there are increases in premiums for the workers every year of the contract, and in fact some fairly substantial increases that work out to, after the 3 years are fully phased in, some of the premiums will nearly triple from what they were. But again, that's still realizing that is very much in line with what others are paying in other cities, and that's just kind of the trend of where we're at on insurance right now, that each of us has to bear a greater burden of some of those costs. There's also some fairly substantial increases in drug copays, particularly on the drugs where there is, for brand name drugs that have a generic equivalent. We really some of the costs between the generics and the brand names can be very vast, and so we want to provide incentives for people to use those generic equivalents where they exist, and so that was an area where we had a pretty substantial increase for drug copays. There also was a small increase in uniform allowance, which was basically just to keep up with the increasing costs, and then we also negotiated in the city's tuition reimbursement policy, which is actually has already been applied to all of the city workers except for the workers in this unit. It had not been negotiated into the contract, so we put that in. And then another area where we recognized some savings was in the command pay area. Command pay basically being if someone of a higher rank is off and someone else has to be stepping in to fulfill those duties, that person would receive a small supplement to their income to help to make up for those increased responsibilities. And one of the things that we had put in there during the renegotiation was to say that the command pay, instead of kicking in right away for some people in the unit, would not kick in until the 5th day. And so we recognize essentially 5 days of savings there. And I also I forgot to thank Ray Hazlett in particular and Kathy's office and the auditor's office, who helped us to run these numbers and confirm that in fact this was a good deal for the city and for the workers. That is an awful lot of information, and I don't expect everyone to have internalized all that, but luckily we do have 3 readings, and of course I'll be happy to take any questions that arise either tonight or along the way here. But I do think it's a fair agreement. It's certainly well within the parameters of what council had said that they were comfortable with, and again, just very pleased that we were able to come to an agreement on that.
Thank you, Law Director Lang, for your efforts in the negotiation and for your explanation this evening. Thank you. Now, questions from council members regarding this? This is the first reading, as Mr. Lang told us. There will be 3 readings, so as we get more familiar with this, there may be questions that arise. Other elected officials have questions? Mayor?
I'd just like to thank the negotiation team for working so hard. I know they spent a lot of time working on all this information and crunching the numbers with the auditor's office. I know they were walking around with a calculator most of last week and the week before, trying to figure it all out. So it was good that we're reaching the end point. And again, this is tough times for everybody, so just be cognizant of the fact that we still have other negotiations coming through, and this is the start of the year. Hopefully the revenues stay flat or better if we're lucky.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on. I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Do we know the total cost of the increases?
We do have that. I don't have that number on me right now, but that's something that was provided by the auditor's
I
office.
have it with me.
We can easily get that for you.
Maybe next week?
And I believe we did give you a document at one point that it basically laid out, it was tied to percentage, but of course since it's not tied to percentage, then it's going to be somewhere in between some of those numbers, and we can get that information for you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to ordinance 00211, an ordinance amending the 2011 appropriations ordinance, introduced by Councilmember Kuhn.
Thank you. I move to consider ordinance 211 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Thank you. And the reason for this is that the auditor's office has a bill that needs to be paid.
All those in favor of suspending the rules, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay. The rules have been suspended for ordinance 0211.
I move to adopt ordinance 211.
Second.
This is basically a bookkeeping issue, and this is the Police Secure Our Schools grant, and it just needs to be moved from one transaction class to another so that the money can be spent. It says that the 211 appropriation ordinance 1/2010 is hereby amended by decreasing Law Enforcement Trust Fund 293 transaction class 500 by $110,000 and increasing transaction class 300 by the same amount and decreasing and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. It's just a matter of moving the money so that it can be used.
Okay. And all those in favor of ordinance 0211, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Ordinance 0211 is adopted. We'll move on. Ordinance 00311, an ordinance amending the Athens City Code establishing salaries for certain elected officials, introduced by all members of council. Guess I will end up speaking about this. This ordinance lays out for the next 4 years the salaries for the mayor, the auditor, and the law director of law. Basically, the mayor's office is receiving a 1% increase per year in the next 4 years. The office of the auditor and the office of the law director will be receiving a 2% raise. Notice that this salary is divided, is broken out, that might not be exactly those amounts because all elected officials receive payments, 24 pays within the year, a little bit differently than our hourly workers. So the salary has to be broken into 24 equal segments, which sometimes makes a difference one way or the other by a few cents, but not significant. Okay. You don't notice it. You don't see any mention of council in here. Council has decided that we would recommend that our compensations remain the same. Okay. And likewise the president of council. Yeah.
So, and I would point out this needs to be passed, if not tonight, a special session next time, because that's not deadline, right?
Exactly. And that's why we, first of all, designated a special session for next week. And then I think there are some other issues that are going to come up for suspension at that time, too. So, but we will be reading this ordinance and asking for suspension of the rules at a special session next Monday. Okay, thank you. Ordinance 00411, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 23 Zoning Code, Chapter 2310.01 Definitions, and Table A, Schedule of Bulk Controls, and Title 99 Definitions, Chapter 99.01.05, Applied Meanings of Words and Terms. Member Falk, would you make sense of that, please?
Basically what this is doing, as per recommendation from the Planning Commission, is changing our total lot coverage to 60% total lot coverage in zones R1, R2, and R3. We've had a public hearing on this, and the Planning Commission also had, not a public hearing, but they did have a hearing on it. This is to help reduce the amount of stormwater runoff that is occurring. We're going to have to do more stormwater runoff planning and maintenance in the future, as per will probably be mandated. So this is the start of working on that.
Any questions?
Again, this is, as Member Fall pointed out, this is one of the first parts of looking at our stormwater management plan that we will have to put in place eventually. And to recognize permeable versus impermeable surface, and the fact that paved surface is impermeable. We have a lot coverage that includes buildings, of course, garages, and structures, which is at the 30% for the residential zones, and this will be the additional 30% for driveways, patios, and other structures, or rather covered. And that's all it is just trying to get a handle on this for the future.
And what was the limit for lot coverage?
60%.
No, before.
Before.
Before,
70.
there wasn't any. For lot coverage, basically, we only looked at the buildings, and that was 30%. But you could pave it from lot line to lot line and not be included. We didn't have anything that recognizes. So that's why we need the new definition to say, okay, we recognize the fact that there's a difference between a driveway and grass.
And if my lot is already covered?
You'd be non-conforming. So probably if you were going to repave it, you probably have to get a variance for it. But probably that's, something different.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Ordinance 00511, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make application and enter into a project agreement with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and declaring an emergency, introduced by Member Butler.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular ordinance will allow the mayor and the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Department to apply for a State of Ohio Nature Works grant to aid them in the construction of a playground on the South Side Park. So quite simply, it's for kids and play and fun. At least, and the mayor may have some more information on this.
Again, it is Southside Park. We're working in conjunction with the Rotary, Athens Rotary. They have a plan to start a phased-in project of making ADA accessible playground equipment for the Southside Park. Part of our assistance would be in the NatureWorks grant. Again, it's a competitive grant. We've done it in the past. We'll see what happens, but the application, again, this will be one of those that need to be suspended next week for the February 1st deadline.
And I was just going to thank the mayor for clarifying that. I wasn't sure if we needed to suspend it this evening or not, but since we might have a special session, we can delay that.
Member Bain?
I was concerned a little bit about how the match we have to cover it in advance, right? Or is this a different one?
NatureWorks is a reimbursement, yes.
Yeah, so, and we have, the last 20% is going to be in kind, I think? Somebody said last week.
Actually, considering the pricing, I think the NatureWorks grants really don't usually go over $30,000, and I think their phase one for the park is actually about $32,000, and they have already up to phase 4. They have various projects that will keep going. So the in-kind would probably be supplied by their Rotary for a lot of that.
You mean not a mulch match, but actually a monetary match?
When you say a mulch match, mulching?
I mean, we're not going to be putting down pathways or doing anything like that. It'll be
I don't
instead.
know. I really don't know.
Well, it's sort of makes me recall the fountain.
I am aware of the fountain.
Yes.
I am very aware of the fountain.
And I don't know if you were on council or just an observer at that time. I always wonder if it's not better to have everything kind of nailed down in advance. Maybe
Okay.
not the equipment, but everything else. You know, like, you're responsible for everything but the NatureWorks grant. That would be one way to nail it down. Unless we have, because 4 years is a long time, potentially.
Yes, we will nail it down. And again, this is just for the phase one, I believe. They've got over $100,000 worth of things they want to do. So this is
And
not,
they have some pretty powerful fundraisers, so
yes,
we'll hope they'll do well.
okay.
Thank you. Ordinance 0611, an ordinance amending ordinance 0110, authorizing the design of the Mill Street Sewer Replacement Project 252, introduced by Councilmember Bain.
I don't know if I'm supposed to suspend, we'll just put it on next time, but 0610, as our acting president said, is appropriating additional funds for the design of the Mill Street Sewer Project, which will be largely funded by CDBG money. And so we're now up to $50,000, $43,000 from what we had before, the debt fund, and then an additional money from the sewer fund, $6,500.
This is just engineering
Right.
planning before the project begins. Okay. That deals with our ordinances. Now we have resolutions for first reading. Resolution 0111. A resolution declaring it necessary to replace a portion of the existing sidewalk and curb on Mill Street between Lash Street and North McKinley Avenue as part of the Mill Street Sanitary Sewer Improvements Project and declaring an emergency. Member Bain.
Mr. President, this is a three-reading resolution. We'll have the second one next time. In order to be on the timeline to have the sidewalks replaced as the sewer project is being done, so it'll be total chaos, I guess, down there. But at the request of the city engineer, we'll be doing this. And he's got a timeline. Actually, we have another one for this total sidewalk replacement, which we have to have more specifically named. But this is one that will be Mill Street between Lash and North McKinley Avenue. And we're basically starting down the path, hopefully, of getting the sidewalks repaired in that heavily pedestrian part of our city. More later. Several more will be coming.
Okay. Resolution 0211, a resolution estimating the amount of interim monies for deposit in public depositories, directing the treasurer to make periodic applications and to award interim deposits as monies become available. Introduced by Councilmember Sands, who's going to turn it over to the treasurer, Mary Ann McClure.
This is a 5-year event. Every 5 years, we renew the depository agreements with primarily local banks or regional banks or any that respond to our bid process that have approved collateral so that our deposits are stable. And we typically approve a maximum amount per bank so that we keep the city's resources spread out among several rather than having it all in one place for purposes of insurance and, again, the collateral support for the funds.
Can you explain what interim monies are, please?
Basically, cash flow. It's the cash that is more or less named. Its use is named, but the funds come in, or we may be holding funds before that project comes about to be spent. Some of the major street repairs, we have to accumulate the funds before they're used. So it's just basically a holding accounts. It's not. We're not allowed to deposit in anywhere other than any longer than 5 years in terms of CDs. That's based on state law. So I guess I'm not sure how else to describe it other than it's available cash that, as the deposits come in and before the expenditures go out, it resides in various banks.
Auditor head?
Well, I was just going to add that while sometimes different departments and funds have a budget that they're limited to, we keep quite a bit of money in the bank still. As Mary Ann said, say property taxes, those payments only come in twice a year. And so we have a lot of money sitting there and it won't be spent as soon as we get it. And I would say that Mary Ann, as treasurer, has been very good about watching that and asking us if we have big payments coming up, or can she, move the money, or should she renew a CD, which ties the money up, or are we going to need it? And we move money even overnight. The amounts of money that we have moved into a high balance savings as opposed to our working account can earn the city money. And I think we have a pretty good relationship where we really pay attention to that money on a weekly and almost daily basis to make sure that we are getting the most from our money. But that is the fact, even though funds, accounts, departments only have a certain budget, there is quite a bit of money that is in the bank at any one time, and we just move it as we need to spend it.
We get a monthly report and an annual projection from the treasurer about earnings that the city gets from these deposits. And so this is a requirement of the Ohio Revised Code that we authorize these resolutions every 5 years. So it is something that I think we're all familiar with. Maybe it's not clear in our minds because we don't deal with it as often as these two ladies do. Okay. Any questions right now for the treasurer? Okay. Again, these are 3 reading resolutions. Resolution 0311, a resolution declaring the intent of the City Council to designate the public depositories for the active funds of the City of Athens, the term for receiving applications, and the time for designation. Treasurer.
As it does state in the resolution, I'll be requesting bids from the local and regional banks to arrive during the first week of February so that we get a chance to review their proposals and approve them for the deposits. And so that we can renew it by March 1st. March 1st of 2011 is the date for the renewal of the 5-year cycle.
Any other questions? Comments? Announcements and other business. We will have a special session next Monday, but we will also be a committee meeting night. So are there committees that feel that they would like to meet? Any? City services?
And add the environment committee to that, please.
Okay.
We probably need to have safety on too, don't we?
I suppose we do.
We have to have safety on.
Oh, you're correct.
Mayor?
Will we need an executive session or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it will be a busy Monday. Will we, clerk of council, will the meeting begin at 7:30 as usual? Or we begin at 7 because we're having this legislature? 7? So will be a 7 o'clock meeting next Monday. An opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on our agenda. Nobody wishes to speak? Therefore, I declare the meeting adjourned at 8:00.